Chapter 1: Mathematics, the Garage, and a Dream That Always Arrives Late. Brian was 54. In Ohio, 54 is the age when a man either permanently fuses with his recliner or begins to suspect that life is an equation where he made a carryover error in the very first step, and now the remainder simply refuses to balance. Brian was an accountant for a trucking company. His life was built of numbers. Numbers were honest. They didn't lie, they didn't show up late for dinner, and, unlike his 14-year-old daughter, they didn't demand a pair of bell-bottom jeans just because everyone else had them. His daughter was a teenager, which, from a mathematical standpoint, is the state of a variable constantly approaching infinite chaos. She was a rebel, but she loved her father with that quiet, fierce loyalty that children in 1978 usually hid behind the loud playing of rock records. His wife, Kate, was perfect. If there were a bureau of standards for wives, Kate would be the blueprint. She knew when to bring coffee, and more importantly, she knew when to remain silent when Brian retreated to the garage. And in the garage, Brian was trying to grab the American dream by the tail. The garage smelled of machine oil, ozone, and unfulfilled hopes. For 20 years, Brian had been designing things. He genuinely believed the world could be improved if you just connected the right wires. He perfected toasters, calculated algorithms for food processors, and designed computing machines. The problem wasn't Brian's talent. The problem was his timing. Brian was the kind of man who would invent an umbrella 2 days before humanity decided to move to the desert. Or, conversely, a week after umbrellas started being handed out for free on every street corner. It was June 1978. The world had gone mad. In California, some kids in garages suspiciously similar to Brian's, were building the future. Apple introduced Apple DOS 3.1. Microsoft released Altair Basic. On June 8th, Intel presented the 8086 processor. The world was hurtling forward at supersonic speed, and Brian sat in Ohio in a perfectly starched blue shirt, staring at his blueprints. He felt like an accountant trying to catch a rocket ship while holding nothing but an abacus and a sense of dignity. And that's when the idea was born. Insane, like all great things. It was a vacuum cleaner, corded, remote-controlled, with 3 power modes. Brian saw it on his workbench as clearly as if it were already sitting in the living room. He didn't know that in 1996, the Swedes at Electrolux would present the Trilobite, the world's first robot vacuum. He had outpaced time by nearly 20 years again. But that evening in Ohio, Brian was simply happy. He believed this vacuum was his ticket to the world of people who don't look at price tags. He put on his best shoes, which he polished with the same meticulousness he used to check balance sheets, and went to find investors. Investors in 1978 were people who wore too much cologne and too little common sense. Brian visited them one by one. In his leather-bound notebook, the names of business titans began to be crossed out, one after another. "Thank you, Mr. What was it, Brian? We'll call you." "We'll call you" in business language means please vanish from this dimension. By the end of the day, Brian's shoes weren't so perfect anymore. They were covered in Ohio dust, the dust of a state where dreams often turn back into cornfields. He went into a coffee shop. His feet ached. He sat by the window, clutching the last $20 bill he had for personal expenses. He stared at it for a long time, at Andrew Jackson's portrait, at the watermarks, at the texture of the paper. And then it hit him. Brian's mathematical brain performed a sudden somersault. He realized why all his inventions failed. The vacuum, the toaster, the calculator, they were all middlemen. He was trying to invent a thing to get money and recognition. "Why should I invent the middleman?" Brian whispered, stroking the 20 with his thumb, "when I can invent the result?" In that second, the accountant in him died. An artist was born. Chapter 2: The Press That Smells of Apples and Cola. The next 6 months Brian spent in the garage as if he were building an ark for a great flood.
But he wasn't building an ark. He was building a printing press. The garage filled with books. But these weren't blueprints for household appliances. They were scientific articles on ink composition, textbooks on lithography, and papers on the fiber structure of flax and linen. Brian studied microprinting as if it were a treasure map. Kate and his daughter got used to his hobby. To them, it was just another dad project, another gadget that would likely sit in a corner gathering dust until progress marched past. They didn't ask what he was working on. In Ohio, there is an unwritten rule. If a man in his garage isn't doing anything illegal, or so they thought, don't disturb his happiness. Brian became quiet, reserved, focused. He was no longer looking for investors. He was looking for the perfect shade of green that wouldn't fade under ultraviolet light. A frosty winter day arrived. One of those days when the air is so clear, the world feels like it's made of thin crystal. Brian left the house. He was composed. His shirt was ironed. His shoes shined. He took his usual route, or so the neighbors thought. 2 hours later, he returned. In his hands was an ordinary paper bag. Inside were fresh fruit and 2 glass bottles of Coke. He entered the house, neatly removed his shoes, and went into the living room. "Dinner's ready, dear," Kate called from the kitchen. Brian sat at the table. He looked like a man who had just solved the master theorem of his life. What had happened in those 2 hours? Nothing much. Brian had simply walked into a store and paid with a bill he had made himself. He had made it so flawlessly that not a single machine, not a single cashier's eye suspected a thing. Brian hadn't just forged money, he had achieved a breakthrough. His printing press was the pinnacle of his engineering mind. The precision of the gears, the ink formula, the pressure of the plate, he had outdone himself. He wasn't a criminal in his head. He was a great engineer who had finally found a way to be paid directly for his labor. No middlemen, no stupid investors.
Chapter 3. The Mona Lisa of the ATM. 2 years passed. Brian's life became ordinary. The euphoria of the first success evaporated quickly, like the smell of a new car. When you can print as much money as you want, money stops being magic. It becomes just paper. The colors of joy faded, and the world became a bit boring again, like an old audit report. The press worked flawlessly. Every bill was a masterpiece. During this time, in a large bank in Cleveland, a young clerk froze over a stack of 20s. His name was Sam, and he had a mild attention disorder that made him notice details others missed. Sam looked at a bill, then another, then back to the first one. He called the senior manager. "Sir, we have a problem." "What is it, Sam? A shortage?" "No, sir, an excess of authenticity." The problem was that all the other bills in the stack, genuine ones issued by the U.S. Mint, looked like pathetic forgeries to Sam compared to Brian's bill. Brian's bill was more real than the original. It was too perfect. The paper was crisper, the ink richer, the lines sharper. That day, the bank became very loud. Secret Service experts arrived. Police, important men in suits that cost more than Brian's entire garage. They peered through magnifying glasses and microscopes. They shouted at each other. "It's impossible," one expert yelled. "The fiber structure is identical to 1974 samples, but the ink application method, it's genius. This isn't a counterfeit, it's art." The investigation lasted 3 months. In FBI and Secret Service circles, they spoke of the ghost of Ohio. They looked for a gang, a syndicate, a massive print shop with state-of-the-art equipment. They couldn't believe all this was being done by one man in a garage, sipping Diet Coke between tasks. Brian's bells were called the Mona Lisa of counterfeits. And Brian, meanwhile, felt deeply unhappy. Because he had wealth, but he didn't have the one thing it was all for: recognition. No one knew it was him. No one patted him on the back.
No one said, "God, Brian, how did you engineer this?" The genius inside him demanded an audience. And so Brian decided to do the thing that usually ruins all great men. He decided to leave a trail. Chapter 4. Bookmarks for the Soul. Brian had always loved to read. He adored Henry Thoreau, Herman Melville, and Edgar Allan Poe. Books were the only place where loneliness was considered a virtue, not a flaw. Now that he didn't have to work at the accounting firm, he had quit, saying he'd received an inheritance, he spent long hours in the library. One day, reading Thoreau in the old city library, he looked at the wad of 20s in his pocket. He felt awkward that these masterpieces were just lying there, invisible to the world. So he tucked a bill into the book, right between the pages where Thoreau discussed civil disobedience. A strange feeling, a mix of thrill and generosity, pierced him. "I will reward those who read the classics," he decided. "I will be their secret patron." Thus began his game. He would take a book, read it — he was an honest man and couldn't leave a bookmark in a book he hadn't finished — and leave a perfect 20 at the end. He wanted to be useful. He wanted someone, opening a book, to feel that the world was full of wonders. He didn't know that Tom went to the same library. Tom was 12. After school, he vanished among the bookshelves because his mother worked 2 jobs and couldn't pick him up earlier. Tom was an amazing boy. He memorized the plots of books by heart. On the way home, he would retell them to his mother, trying to pull her into a world of adventure. But Tom's mom had a head full of unpaid bills, gas prices, and the fact that Tom's only pair of sneakers had holes. She usually nodded and asked at the end, "That's very interesting, honey. What do you think about that?" without even hearing the answer. Imagine Tom's face when, in Moby Dick, he found a brand new, crisp 20, and then another in The Scarlet Letter, and another in the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. Tom told his mother honestly, "Mom, there's money in the books, real money." "Yes, yes, Tom," she replied, counting cents in her purse. "There's knowledge in books, and knowledge is wealth. You're a very smart boy." But one day, they stopped at the butcher shop. Mom chose a cut of beef for dinner, a small luxury for a celebration. But opening her bag, she turned pale. Her wallet was gone. She left it at work or on the bus. She stood before the butcher, feeling the lump of humiliation in her throat. Then Tom tugged her sleeve. "Mom, don't worry. I told you about the investments. I can lend you some money from my wallet." He pulled out a stack of 20s, 7 of them, $140. In 1978, for a 12-year-old boy, it was a fortune. For his mother, it was a shock. And now, the irony that life loves so much. Tom's father, who lived separately but remained on friendly terms, was a county police officer. When he saw that money, he didn't celebrate. He became suspicious because he had already heard about the ghost of Ohio and his perfect bills. Chapter 5. The Sound and the Fury in the Interrogation Room. The case took a new turn. The FBI and the Secret Service got a lead. The library card, the list of those who had checked out Melville, Poe, and Thoreau over the last 6 months. Overnight, the library staff changed. The old ladies in glasses vanished, replaced by sturdy men and women who watched anyone approaching the classics shelves with suspicious intensity. On the 17th day, Brian came to the library. He was calm. In his hands was a new novel, William Faulkner's The Sound and the Fury. He read it, savoring every word. When he finished, he stood up carefully, walked to the shelf, and tucked a freshly printed 20 between the pages. The moment he placed the book on the shelf, a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. "Sir, we have a few questions for you. Come with us." Brian didn't flinch. He didn't try to run. On the contrary, he smiled slowly. It was the smile of a man who had finally reached the finale of a long play. "I'm ready," he said. "I've been waiting for you for the last 6 months." The interrogation was more like a press conference. Brian didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't dodge. He sat surrounded by FBI agents, bankers, and printing experts, and with great relish told them how he had engineered the press. He drew diagrams of the plates for them, explained the chemical formula of the ink, and how he achieved the perfect alignment of the watermarks. This was his moment of glory. The experts listened to him, mouths agape. They didn't see a criminal. They saw a genius who had done what entire nations failed to do. Brian got 20 years. Such was the mathematics of justice. An error in the equation led to prison. He accepted it with dignity, almost with relief. In prison, he became the most respected man. He fixed everything from the guards' radios to the kitchen food processors. But 2 years later, his cell doors swung open. 2 men in sharp suits arrived, Secret Service agents. "Mr. Brian," they said, "we have a problem. Counterfeits have appeared in neighboring states. The quality is terrible, but there's so many that the economy is beginning to hiccup. And honestly, we need someone who understands this better than all our labs put together." It turned out that even 2 years later, Brian remained the best. America, that strange country that first throws you in jail and then offers you a job, gave him a second chance. Recognition came from where he least expected it. He became a consultant for the Secret Service. He no longer printed money. He caught those who tried to do it worse than he did. Brian finally had everything: money, now a perfectly legal agent's salary, and, most importantly, recognition. FBI agents checked every book in every library in the state. They seized hundreds of bills. Note,
But they couldn't remove the legend.
for years after that, a gold rush existed in Ohio. People who had never in their lives held anything more complex than a newspaper suddenly started signing up for libraries. They bought up American classics. They turned every page of Melville and Faulkner, hoping to find a crisp greeting from Brian. Brian smiled whenever he heard about it, because in the end, he had achieved the most important thing. He made all of Ohio read books, and that, you must admit, is worth far more than any $20.